What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so having this cold sucks, but the show must go on. So we are covering the aftermath to the Oz effect, which in truth really kind of starts the mystery of Dr. Manhattan, which is really kind of cool. Because one of the things that's going on with regards to the Doomsday Clock story is Superman meeting Dr. Manhattan. I mean, that's really going to be like one of the great big huge things that happens. But one of the big questions people have is, how do we get to that point? How do we get to the point whereby Superman meets Dr. Manhattan? Well, of course, a lot of that's unfolding in the Doomsday Clock story. But what this also does is sort of grab Superman and DC Rebirth as a whole and begin the process of trying to chase after Manhattan and figure out what's going on. Now, the cool thing about this is that this initially picks up in the immediate aftermath of the Oz effect. Now, in that story, we of course learned that Mr. Oz was Jor-El, the father of Superman, and this had two major ramifications. The first was the fact that the father of Superman was alive, which of course was believed to be virtually impossible because of the fact that Krypton was destroyed. Now, what we found out in the Oz effect was that someone, presumably Dr. Manhattan, had grabbed Jor-El the moment before Krypton's destruction, basically altered the past of Krypton itself, and then kept Jor-El alive and transported him on Earth. So really, it kind of brings into fray a lot of the actions of Manhattan himself, which is to say, according to the traditional history of the DC universe, Jor-El died on Krypton when it blew up. But because of the actions of Manhattan, with the Watchmen being rolled over into DC Rebirth, instead of those events transpiring the way they always did, Manhattan saved Jor-El. Now, we don't know why. We know Jor-El's interpretation, which was basically to show, Jor-El that humanity was not worth saving, and that Superman trying to save people from themselves was a fool's errand. And so the result was to try to swindle Superman, try to get him to walk away from Earth, form a new Krypton, and then just repopulate the Kryptonian race, more or less. It was interesting because what this does is it sort of throws Superman into this existential crisis. For years and years and years, Superman always knew there were like absolute factors in his life. He always knew his father died, his mother died. He always knew he was the last son of Krypton until Kara Zor-El came back and then realized, that his cousin was a survivor of Krypton. It was always the idea that him and Lois Lane were meant to be together. They have kids or they have a son, that kind of stuff, but like these cornerstones of Superman's life is all predicated on the fact that there's no going back. There's no way for him to basically reconnect with his parents, but to suddenly have his father thrown back into his life and then basically be told his father became a villain and his father was saved by some sort of being out there of incalculable power suddenly throws the entire life of Superman into disarray. It takes Superman and it makes him very human because he responds the exact same way that we would. When he basically goes through and starts reconnecting or rebuilding the Kel-X robot from Krypton, one of the first questions he asks here is, who's your master? The response is Jor-El. Who is Mr. Oz? The response, Jor-El. This is DC confirming the fact that it wasn't a red herring. Mr. Oz was definitively Jor-El. And so if that's the case, then Superman now has to come face to face with the fact that it's entirely possible that one, his father survived the destruction of Krypton, and two, his father became a bad guy. And if his father became a bad guy, what does that say about him? Because all of his understanding, all of Superman's understanding about the world stems from a combination of what he learned from the Kents and what moral compasses his parents gave him through the various holograms and so on and so forth that he interfaced with over the course of his life. Now again, this is a really cool moment because in the middle of all this, he's suddenly met by the arrival of Batman. Now of course, the fact that Batman showed up without Superman realizing it is really just designed to show us how distracted Superman is, that he easily should have overheard, Batman's arrival just by virtue of his super hearing and the Bat Jet and so on and so forth. But notice this, Batman begins dropping these little things, basically saying, hey look, there's something wrong with time. I came here because I'm a friend. I came here because I'm concerned for you, but it's not just you. Jor-El coming back, it's not just you. I encountered my own father. Someone, somewhere, has messed with time. This all goes back to DC Universe number 1, the one shot that set the whole DC Rebirth landscape in motion. This goes back to the button when Barry Allen and Bruce Wayne ended up traveling to the Flashpoint universe, which we thought had been destroyed. All these things are going on. All these things are hitting home to the idea that someone somewhere is screwing with things. Now, one of the biggest indications of what this is and how this impacts Superman, in the middle of Superman talking to his wife and trying to understand what's going on, even questioning the fact as to whether or not he's a good father, because of the fact that his life is in such a state of disarray, he's suddenly met by Hal Jordan, who basically says, look, we may be able to give you an answer to the question that you're searching for. Of course, Superman races off, meets with Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern's home base of Mogo, and what they do is they show him a kind of like a recorded database of Krypton's destruction. What it basically shows is how Krypton was obliterated, the fact that, the planet just sort of exploded and that was really about it, but it also shows his rocket being fired off from the planet and his parents' last-ditch effort to basically basically keep one of their race alive. But before we see what happens next, before we end up seeing Jor-El being saved or something like that, suddenly the video feed is scrambled, meaning somebody tampered with it, or the actual event itself was kind of screwed up. And what this seems to indicate is exactly what Jor-El said, that somewhere in those final moments when Krypton was about to be destroyed, when everything was about to end, someone reached in, grabbed him, and kept him alive. That person is clearly Dr. Manhattan. That's what seems to be going on here. But again, there's no definitive information given here. This whole idea of Manhattan somehow intervening, this whole idea of Manhattan being involved in here is also cloak and dagger, because all the clues point to him, but nothing says it's him. And that's what's so cool about this, because we know it's him. We know it's Manhattan. There's no reason for it not to be. In this moment, Superman says, well, the only way for me to definitively know for sure, the only way for me to actually know what it was that happened to my father when Krypton was basically destroyed is to go back and to see Krypton when it was destroyed. So traveling to the Justice League Watchtower, what he ends up doing is tracking down the cosmic treadmill. Now, the cosmic treadmill is basically the treadmill Flash uses to run back and forth through time. Really just kind of a way for him to traverse the entire landscape. Now, depending on what era of stories you're reading from the Flash, it really kind of varies. The cosmic treadmill was something that was used way back in the Silver Age. Again, it was the means that Barry Allen used to travel back and forth through time. We've seen stories where he's done that without using the cosmic treadmill. He can just run fast enough to break the time barrier. So really kind of depends on what era you're really pointing to. This is kind of a throwback, and it really sort of points the finger back to like 1950s Flash comics, but it is still pretty cool because Superman needs it, right? Like, this is not Silver Age Superman for the 1950s and 60s. He can't do anything he wants to. He can't just travel back in time and all that kooky stuff. He needs to use a cosmic treadmill, which is cool because what this does is it allows him to use the treadmill and run all the way back to Krypton itself, basically run back however many thousands of years to the point at which Krypton was, at its height, and then basically find that point where Krypton was going to be destroyed and then figure out what in the world went on, possibly even save his parents in the process. But notice this could potentially have massive ramifications for the whole idea of the DC landscape. Remember, this is what happened with Flashpoint. What you're seeing right here, this is what started New 52. Barry Allen went back in time and saved his mom's life, only to find out that everything happened differently from the way it was supposed to. He had to go back in time and let her die in order for things to be preserved, in order for everything to return to a state of normalcy. Superman is making this exact same mistake, but in order to try to stop Superman from doing this, what we end up finding out is the moment in which he vanishes, basically we end up having the arrival of Booster Gold, who shows up from the future to try to stop Superman, to keep the entire universe from collapsing into itself as a result of whatever it is that he ends up doing. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.